Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day. You're listening to the RX Daily Dose. Today's episode is being recorded for Monday, January 25th, and I'm your host, Ian Parnagoni. We update this podcast for healthcare providers, medical professionals, and anyone who has an interest in drug updates. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on all your favorite podcast platforms and social media, including iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. All links can be found in the show notes below. So in today's episode, the first episode for 2021, we'll be discussing the approval of Gemtesa for overactive bladder and approval of an added indication of Enhertu. We'll also go through the approval of a new monthly injectable product for HIV treatment. And as always, feel free to skip around. I'm going to include times in the show notes so you get the drugs that interest you. First, for this episode, the FDA announced the approval of Vibegron, which goes by brand name Gemtesa, a once-daily treatment for overactive bladder with symptoms of urgency and urinary frequency in adults. This approval marks the first new oral brand overactive bladder medication approved by the FDA since 2012, and it is the first product approval for Urovant Sciences. Overactive bladder is a condition that occurs when the bladder muscle contracts involuntarily. Symptoms may include urinary urgency, which is defined as the sudden urge to urinate that is difficult to control, urgency incontinence, defined as unintentional loss of urine immediately after an urgent need to urinate, frequent urination, and nocturia, or waking up more than 2 times in the night to urinate. More than 30 million Americans suffer from bothersome symptoms of OAB, which can have a significant impairment on a patient's day-to-day activities. Gemtesa is an oral once-daily tablet containing 75 milligrams of Vibegron, a small molecule beta-3 agonist, which helps relax the detrusor bladder muscle so that the bladder can hold more urine, thereby reducing symptoms of OAB. The FDA's approval is based on results from an extensive development program involving more than 4,000 OAB patients, including the 12-week double-blind placebo-controlled Phase 3 Empower study with a dose of 75 milligrams and the double-blind Empower long-term extension study. The data shows that treatment with Gemtesa resulted in statistically significant reductions in daily incontinence and urgency episodes, and an increase in the volume avoided when compared to placebo in Empower. The most common adverse reactions of Gemtesa from the double-blind placebo-controlled Empower study were headache, nasopharyngitis, diarrhea, nausea, and upper respiratory tract infection. Gemtesa demonstrated the same results for the adverse events of hypertension and increased blood pressure as placebo. Urovant Sciences is planning to launch Gemtesa in the U.S. late in the first quarter of 2021, and will face direct competition from Astellas Pharma's Mybetriq, along with multiple other first-line agents used to treat OAB. Also this week, the FDA expanded the indication for Enhertu for the treatment of adults with locally advanced or metastatic HER2-positive gastric or gastroesophageal junction adenocarcinoma who have received a prior trastuzumab-based regimen. Enhertu is a human epidermal growth factor receptor 2, or HER2, directed antibody and topoisomerase inhibitor conjugate, meaning that the drug targets the changes in HER2 that help the cancer grow, divide, and spread, and is linked to a topoisomerase inhibitor, which is a chemical compound that is toxic to cancer cells. In the US, gastric cancer is most frequently diagnosed in the advanced stage, with only approximately 5% of patients surviving beyond 5 years. Approximately 1 in 5 gastric cancers are HER2 positive. The approval is based on the positive results from the randomized Destiny Gastric 1 Phase 2 trial conducted in Japan and South Korea. In the trial, Enhertu demonstrated a statistically significant and clinically meaningful improvement in overall survival and objective response rate versus chemotherapy in patients with advanced gastric cancer or gastroesophageal junction adenocarcinoma who had progressed on at least 2 or more prior regimens. In a pre-specified interim analysis from the Destiny Gastric 1 trial, patients treated with Enhertu had a 41% reduction in the risk of death versus patients treated with chemotherapy, and a median overall survival of 12.5 months versus 8.4 months. Confirmed overall response rate, assessed by independent central review, was a major efficacy outcome. Results showed a confirmed overall response rate of 40.5% in patients treated with Enhertu, compared to 11.3% in patients treated with chemotherapy. Patients treated with Enhertu had a 7.9% complete response rate and a 32.5% partial response rate, compared to a complete response rate of 0 and a partial response rate of 11.3% for patients treated with chemotherapy. Enhertu demonstrated a median progression-free survival of 5.6 months, compared to 3.5 months with chemotherapy. Additionally, Enhertu showed a median duration of response of 11.3 months versus 3.9 months with chemotherapy. The most common adverse reactions, including lab abnormalities for patients treated with Enhertu in the Destiny Gastric 1 trial, were blood lab abnormalities, nausea, decreased appetite, and increased liver enzymes. And finally this week, the FDA approved a combination injectable of cabotegravir and rilpivirine, which goes by brand name Cabenuva, as a complete regimen for the treatment of HIV-1 infection in adults to replace a current antiretroviral regimen in those who are virologically suppressed or a stable antiretroviral regimen with no history of treatment failure and with no known or suspected resistance to either cabotegravir or rilpivirine. This is the first FDA-approved injectable, complete regimen for HIV-infected adults that is administered once a month. In conjunction with this approval, the FDA also approved oral formulations of cabotegravir, going by brand name Vocabria, to be used in conjunction with rilpivirine, which goes by brand name Edurant. Both should be taken for 1 month prior to starting treatment with Cabenuva to ensure the medications are well tolerated before switching to the extended-release injectable formulation. The safety and efficacy of Cabenuva were established through 2 randomized open-label controlled clinical trials in 1,182 HIV-infected adults who were virologically suppressed, which is defined as HIV-1 RNA less than 50 copies per milliliter, before initiation of treatment with Cabenuva. Patients in both trials continued to show virological suppression at the conclusion of each study, and no clinically relevant change from baseline in CD4 positive cell counts was observed. The most common adverse reactions with Cabenuva were injection site reactions, fever, fatigue, headache, musculoskeletal pain, nausea, sleep disorders, dizziness, and rash. Cabenuva should not be used if there is a known previous hypersensitivity reaction to either product, or in patients who are not virally suppressed. Cabenuva and Vocabria were granted Fast Track and Priority Review designation by the FDA. The FDA granted the approval of Cabenuva and Vocabria to ViiV Healthcare. And that's all I have for right now. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'll include all links in the show notes below, so please go back and check those out too. Please please connect with me on any of your social media platforms and give me feedback on what you heard today. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. And as always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.